And also too, the other thing that disc golf does, I think, like with the World Championships, the way that they have them set up. Obviously, it's different now because I think it went to 5 days, I believe. But like back when they were doing like 7 days, and when they're doing like final,
There was like 9
nines and-
rounds.
Yeah, when they're doing all this stuff, like you don't really leave any ability of like someone that just gets hot and
Yeah.
has a good
That's
couple days.
That's the thing. I never liked it as a tournament format, but that's the one thing I liked about it that separated worlds.
The best player
was
will
gonna
always
win.
gonna win.
Yeah.
But if you're a fan, you kind of like the Cinderella story kind of gets like cut out because
But
it's like.
the world. If we're gonna put a world title, I think the Cinderella story should be cut out.
But I think 4 rounds is plenty of rounds.
It still leaves room for a fluke.
You can't say it's a fluke.
You
I'm
can't
just
say a
saying,
fluke, but it leaves room for a.
But like if you're gonna do 7 rounds, why not do 12? Why not do 15? Why not do?
Well, like I said, I don't like it as a tournament format. I'm just thinking if you're calling worlds, something needs to happen to separate it. Something.
Well, I just think you just play it on.
But
a
like
really
back in the
freaking
day,
hard
you go back to
course.
2015.
7 rounds is too long.
You go back to 2015 Worlds. Paul won. I don't remember how many rounds it was, but they had the final 9. Round 1, or I think it was by round 1 or round 2. After one of those 2 rounds, he's out of it. Everyone knows he's out of it. There's no chance. And then he goes course record, tied course record, or something like that.
I mean, but you're not out of it if there's 7 rounds and you have 2 bad rounds.
Yeah, but that's what I'm saying. It's like there's the Cinderella story was Paul winning his 3rd in a row at the time because
Sure.
he was completely out of it, and then going into the final 9, which is the only 9 holes I got to watch that year. Going into the final 9, he was a victory lap. There was no one that could touch him.
You were watching that?
I saw the final 9 live. Yeah, that was
Okay.
my first disc golf tournament I watched live.
Okay, were you paying attention to? Were you there the
Yeah,
whole tournament?
No, I
Okay.
flew in for the final 9.
So were you paying attention like every day? Round 1, round 2,
No, this
round
is the
3,
first time
round
I ever
4?
got into disc golf. That was the first tournament I ever followed.
Okay.
And all I knew was Paul was winning.
That's an interesting debate down the road. Of like, how many rounds is too many rounds?
I think 4 is where it should be.
Because like 7 rounds, like
No,
how are
yeah,
you
it's too
getting?
much.
How are you getting people
What
like
do they do in
engaged?
golf?
4.
4, but there's no
Four?
world championship.
Well, yeah.
There's no like
No.
Right.
the Masters, I guess, is like
Don't you
the
have like
holy
the
grail
big
of a
4?
title. But
Isn't that a thing?
The what?
The big 4 or like the
well,
big
there's
3?
four,
The
there's
heck
4
is the Big
majors.
Four?
Are you talking about like the big
Majors.
4 like major sports?
Football,
No, dude, the
basketball.
That's the only time I've ever
the
heard it. I think it's Big
tournaments.
5 sports
Okay.
of
Wait,
like
what?
I think there are 5 big sports.
NHL, MLB, NFL, NBA,
UFC,
No.
FIFA.
NHL. Did I say NHL?
I think
I don't
there's
know.
4.
There might be 4. Those are like the major sports
College
in the US.
basketball.
Regardless, I don't even know how he started. I agree. 4 rounds is as much as a major should be. I just think like if you're calling something a world title, I didn't mind the idea of at least having something to separate it. If we're gonna put as much weight as we do on one title,
Yeah.
that's the whole issue to me. Is like
That's why I think
The
it should
whole
just be a
weight-
time thing. That's the easiest
Sure.
way of doing it. It's like every
Biannual.
other year.
Sure, that works too.
That's the easiest way. Nothing, no drastic changes. It also gives 2 years for like they'll know. I mean, obviously down the road, hopefully, like let's say if a world championship is happening in 2026, they should already know that they're hosting it now.
Yeah.
Like down the road, you'd want that, but it gives you plenty of time to like. I don't know. And I think also just not having it every year, it gives the world champion a little bit more like they hold it for a little bit longer, build up. I think that would be I mean, obviously right now I'm probably getting roasted in the chat as like that's a stupid take because, everyone loves seeing the world championship every year. It's the most exciting thing. But
Yeah.
imagine how big of a tournament it would be if it didn't happen every year and it was every other year, how exciting it would be and how like
Well,
it would just feel
Worlds shouldn't be a major. It should be its own
thing.
own tier.
Yeah.
Of like you have the world championship and then you have our 4 majors throughout the year. And it's like US DGC, European Open, Champions Cup, and the tournament.
All right. Let's talk real quick about Dana White, Jake Paul diss track. Did anyone see it?
I watched it after you said we're going to talk about it tonight.
Okay.
I've heard about it.
So the only thing I kind of want to bring this up is at what point, because fighter pay, I mean, basically this has been an issue with the UFC for a while, And, Jake Paul, obviously, I think there's lots of motives of why Jake Paul is doing this. I do think he actually generally cares about trying to get money to some of these people. I also think he, anytime he can dunk on Dana White, he's going to take that chance.
Yeah.
But at what point does disc golf fall into this as well with the payouts? At what point do fans, do players,
Is the UFC a for-profit organization?
Yeah.
See, that's where it gets interesting because, like, I believe the Pro Tour is as well. And what's interesting is, like, their whole business model and the UFC's whole business model, nothing wrong with this business model, is to create these events, create these experiences, put everything in there and make it as profitable as possible as a business.
Mm-hmm.
Issue that can happen, and if what Jake Paul in his song was saying is true, what can happen is if the top heads get greedy enough, then they can basically use the players, the fighters, the whatever. This isn't happening in disc golf, but in UFC you can use the fighters, you can use however, and basically give them what feels like a lot of money, but really to you it's chump change. You'd blow your nose in that because you're able to just, hey, $10,000 if you get in the ring, and then you make 50 grand off of them stepping in it alone when you don't even factor in everything else, and that's probably not even the ratio. It's probably way higher.
Yeah, is there like a like that? I guess that's the question of like, is there like a formula? Is there a ratio, if you will, of like how much money players, whether it's in disc golf or UFC or whatever, are making versus the event? Like, obviously,
I don't think there's ever a right answer, because I think the right answer is every other. I know the NFL or the PGA Tour. I think the right answer is the sports league being a nonprofit.
Yeah, well, the PGA Tour is a nonprofit.
I don't know if the NFL and those are.
I don't know if the NFL.
But the NFL one's interesting because the teams make the profits.
The teams are the ones that are doing.
So you have to look at something like the PGA.
You gotta look at the PGA Tour being a nonprofit.
I think that's the smartest way to go about it, because a nonprofit allows you to get the money you need to cover your expenses. You pay the people that need to run it, but you aren't in this situation where
trying to make as much money as possible.
And there's no right answer, realistically, because like Dana White deserves to get paid for creating the UFC so fighters can even get paid. Mm-hmm. And then it's basically going to be up to each person watching as to how much Dana White deserves. And if Dana White takes more or less than that, then there's going to be people upset at him. So like you can pay the UFC fighters more, but the fact that Dana White is making a profit and the UFC is making a profit off of them, there's always going to be people that say that's not enough. But you can't really put a number on what is enough.
Yeah, no, it's tricky. And I mean, obviously the Disc Golf Pro Tour have been pretty upfront with their numbers as far as like their subscription service to the Disc Golf Network and stuff. And so I'm curious, and this is more like maybe a question for the people listening and stuff. So you can tweet us at Debate Night Pod on Twitter, or you can hit us up in the comments here on the YouTube channel. I'm curious what your guys' thoughts are as far as like you hear the numbers of how much money the Disc Golf Pro Tour is making, and then you look, or even like you start seeing more and more sponsors coming in or whatever it may be, and you start thinking like, okay, there's a lot of money going in, and the purses aren't really moving. Now, there hasn't been any, like, I'm just saying right now, there hasn't been any signs of this. Like, the purses are moving in the right direction.
Yes.
You saw, like, sponsorships and stuff. Big name companies coming to the Disc Golf Pro Tour Championship, and, you know, they're giving away a lot of cash there. The question is just kind of like down the road, you know, will there ever come a time and place where we start seeing, like, people kind of, like, forgetting about it a little bit, and the money's, like, just kind of.
Well, I mean,
like USDGC, for example, right? Like USDGC separate from the Disc Golf Pro Tour.
Mm-hmm.
You look back the last 10 years, and the money has kind of like
fluctuated a little bit.
Fluctuated where you'd think it'd be like a slow incline. So it's something to think about.
Yeah, I think right now it's pretty, unless something's changed, it's been like publicly said multiple times that the Pro Tour isn't turning a profit yet for another few years is their plan. They're just reinvesting everything, and they're okay with operating without a profit. Once they start turning a profit, which they should, they're a business, and that's good for the future of the sport. again, I think it's just going to be up to each personal preference because you don't want to operate on too razor thin of margins because
No.
then one event doesn't bring in enough money and you collapse. But then you don't want to operate on too big of margins because then you have the speculation of all the players who are making you that money of like they might not now come play your events because you're making too much money. So it's like this perfect balance. But even when you're right in the middle of whatever that percentage is, there's going to be people that are upset. But realistically, I think what happens is, or what should happen is, as they're a private business, the money numbers already aren't super public. They're going to get probably less public unless there's like some big time deal to where until like public companies start getting involved of like they're sponsoring the event, most people probably won't know what the title sponsorship costs X, Y, or Z.
Yeah.
And so if you don't know, this isn't how it's happening. But if I'm gonna just pick a brand I see, Apple. If Apple paid $2 million to be the title sponsor of the Pro Tour Championship, and the Pro Tour Championships announced a $500,000 pro purse.
I'll cut you.
I chose a public company,
Yeah,
which
I'll
goes against what I was saying.
well,
but
I'll cut you off real quick. I do think the title sponsor and stuff like that, I do think they work with the tour with the purse. So
yeah,
I feel like Apple would say like, hey, we're going to give $2 million to sponsor this, and we want 70% of that to go into the purse.
yeah, they might. But what
I
I'm
think
saying
there's
is,
probably is some conversation there. But
sure. But I'm just saying when numbers aren't public, the public doesn't know what actually goes on. So like there might never be a question because you might not know that, oh, this event brought in $5 million. This is 30 years from now, brought in $5 million and the purse got 1 million of it.
Yeah, the winner got $10,000.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If 10 years from now we're in that spot still and disc golf's grown exponentially, then yeah, we can
Questions
rightfully
will be
ask questions.
Do we
Right now, I don't think there's any reason to even think
No.
about that.
Do we think that there will ever be a competitor to the Disc Golf Pro Tour? Do you ever think anyone will look at, wow, like I could do better than what the Disc Golf Pro
Yeah.
Tour is doing? Or
I think there'll be at least an attempt. The same year the Pro Tour launched, there was the Disc Golf World Tour that launched as well, and that had a 1-year stint, possibly 2-year, back in 2016. I mean, realistically, the Pro Tour was in a way launched as a competitor to the National Tour. Whether I don't think it was marketed that way, but you can't look at it and say it wasn't because now it's overtaken it. There will always be like different things that come up as a challenger or whatever you want to call it. I think it's more susceptible to it right now because realistically,
hasn't been established long enough?
yeah. So realistically, right now, there's not a ton of prestige around being the Pro Tour champion versus if there was a tour that came up and the winner of the entire tour got $500,000 cash. I mean, players would almost be dumb not to play it.
Yeah.
So that's where it would be tough early. 10 years from now, if the Pro Tour is the only one standing, it's going to be a lot harder to challenge them because then they're the ones that everything flows to. But I think there will be at least someone that tries to do it as disc golf gets bigger, because if an outside company came in, I'm sure they could look at disc golf and be like, hey, we could invest X amount and do X, Y, or Z better. And if they thought that it was worth their time and investment,
That would be a crazy time in the sport where like players are having to pick and choose.
yeah, like are you going to be
where
on the Nike
go.
tour or are you going to stay on the Pro Tour?
Yeah.
Like,
that'd
I don't
be-
know, man. What are you doing?
But ultimately, it comes down to like, well, not necessarily money, but if you're making more at one tour, you're obviously going to play in that tour. So if a company or if a tour, if you're making more on the whatever tour,
Yes and no, though.
It depends
Silas.
on the ratio. Right now, I think it's true because, like I said, if you could go play, if the Japan Open happened tomorrow and it was a part of some new tour, and the winner is going to get $300,000 in the current state of disc golf, yeah, there might be one or two players in disc golf that are like, no, I'm taking a stand, being loyal to the Pro Tour, but $300,000 is a drastic, life-changing amount of money.
oh yeah,
If you're making $100,000 if you win a Pro Tour event and someone comes in and offers $300,000, and you're going to see a lot more people like, no, I'm loyal to the Pro Tour because I'm already living comfortably.
right.
The
right.
real like first question I would say is like the European tour, because that already exists.
Yeah, the European Pro Tour.
What you're seeing a lot of European players, come out their schedule saying that they're going to come over and they're going to do basically Vegas and the Texas swing, and I think then go back and then come back maybe. But that would be another real interesting thing down the road is what if the European Tour all of a sudden started like every tournament, the winner got $25,000.
Mm-hmm.
Like how many people? Because right now we're thinking about, I think we were all thinking about like, what if another tour in the United States happened? That is like, okay, are you willing to pick up your life and move it to a different country?
Yeah.
Or a different continent,
For
really?
the right price.
Well, yeah, and I think that'll be interesting to see because
Well, we've
right now
seen
you don't see any United States players go over the European Tour.
Right.
You see everyone go over here, but what if over there it started taking off? They started marketing it, the exposure. Like, what if they got? Like, that's the other question. Like, what if the European Tour, since it is, in some of these areas, Finland, Estonia, some of these areas, it's a really, really big sport. What if the European Tour got some sort of like FS1 deal, and now all of a sudden, like you can actually, your live coverage is now on TV over there. Like our players,
Pretty sure some of it is.
our players. Well, I think it's over like local,
local
not
stuff.
international stuff.
No,
I'm talking
no,
about like
local
if it was
stuff.
like international.
Yeah.
Similar to like you can see a lot of the European Tour events in golf over here in the States. Like that would also be a wild thing of like how many people are like, I want to go over there because I'm going to get more exposure. Because I think that's the other thing is like the money thing. Sure, if you're going from $10,000 to $300,000, everyone's probably going to 3. But if you're going from like $100,000 to 125, but the $100,000 has more exposure, like there's a lot of different variables that go into it. So
the European Tour is a great point. But it is interesting because the Pro Tours, I think they have a Pro Tour in Europe this year, don't they? Or Silver Series?
Yes, the Sula will be a Silver Series event.
Yeah. And so the Pro Tour is starting to dip
Dabble
their
over
toes
there.
in European water, to where I think the Pro Tour's plan is probably to have like 1 or 2 stops over there within the next few years. From what it seems like to me, it seems like the Pro Tour is eventually going to be a tournament most weekends of the year, and playing a full tour is making it to like 20, 25 of them.
Yeah.
To where like no one's playing every Pro Tour the entire week, like every single one. Because that, I could be mistaken, but isn't that kind of how golf works? Like golfers don't play every single PGA Tour event.
The top guys don't.
Yeah.
Some of the people that like
If you're grinding it out,
yeah.
Sure. Because I mean, I've heard of some tour winners, and they'll mention an event, and I'm like, "What the heck is that?" And they'll be like, "Oh, that's because no one was there."
They also have like what they consider like their AB events. They don't market them that way, but there are some events like the WGC, which is the World Golf Championships. That's like its separate kind of thing, and I think there's a couple of those a year, and that's outside of the PGA Tour. So I think like the top 50 or 60 players, I want to say, go to those WGC events because those are the only people that can qualify for them. So then the PGA Tour event that's going on that same weekend is pretty much just like everyone else.
I got
So like that's where like you can kind of sneak a win.
Sneak a tour win in.
Yeah. So
Get that bonus money.